You are live. That's what it says on the screen.
Hey,
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 good evening, everybody. My name's Shane, and
evening,
this is Andy.
hey,
Hey,
evening, gang.
welcome to the Icecast Live. Hey, messages on the
Hey,
screen, just what I need. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, but nice to see you.
And
Nice to see
you,
you, mate.
buddy. Yeah, it seems like a while since we've caught up. Actually,
2 weeks,
has it
3
been
weeks.
2 weeks?
I don't know.
Yeah,
We had Jessica on, didn't we, talking about the Stokerverse?
that's right. And Dacre Stoker. Oh,
Yeah,
that was a good show. That was
yeah,
actually
it
a
was
really good
very
show.
cool.
That.
Yeah,
It was a bit of an
yeah.
education, wasn't it?
Well, you think you know about genre stuff, and then suddenly it all sort of falls into place that you don't know that
Yeah,
much about him. So yeah,
yeah,
I mean that
yeah.
was cool.
It was
Anyway, we
fascinating.
digress. We
Mhm.
digress.
Yes.
So we
Would
got
you like to talk about our guest as you are working with him at the moment? I
Oh,
believe.
that's right. Yeah, I was in Brawler 2 for Steve. So we got Steve Tanner of Time Bomb Comics, who is a master of Kickstarter and comic
Yeah.
shows. Apparently, he can sell comics to Sam Morgan. So we're probably going to find out. But he's a cracking fella.
Yes.
He's been about on the indie scene for over 10 years.
Mm.
Um, I mean, we remember him bringing his daughter when she was a tiny little baby, I think, to one of the Bristols. I think she was dressed in like a cosplay or like a Supergirl outfit or something.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
she's a big, practically a teenager.
Yeah. She's a star in her own right. I think these
She
days.
is, yeah, yeah. Well, when we get comic shows going again,
Yeah.
we'll fall back into our natural habitats. But yeah,
Definitely,
yeah.
mate.
So we've got
Definitely.
Mr. Steve Tanner.
Looking
Um,
forward to it. Run the
yeah,
VT, Sam.
go, go, go!
Welcome back to the
Hey,
Icecast.
there we
And
go.
welcome, Steve Tanner of Time Bomb
Welcome,
Comics. How you
Steve.
doing, Steve?
Hello, good to see you guys.
Nice to see you, Steve.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you on the show, mate. As you know, I've been trying to get you on for a while. It's like
I'll,
trying to
I'll be
get
I'll be very elusive. Yes.
You're a
you.
busy man, very busy man.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff you've been putting out over the last few years, mate. I am in total awe of the work rate. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Brawler. I mean, that is a really high quality anthology. But tonight we're here to talk about the latest Flintlock, aren't we? Which is, I believe, book 5 we're on now.
Yeah, book 5. That's currently running as a Kickstarter now. So it's kind of nice to get to something like book 5
Can
because
you remind us? Did you kickstart all 5 books? Or
oh yeah, I did. In fact, it was the second Kickstarter I did. I mean, it's now my 15th because I've done quite a few since then. But yeah, the first Kickstarter I did was for the first volume of the Bomb Scares anthology, and that was that was the first one I did it right in October 2015, and then the Flintlock, the book 1 of Flintlock, that was then done in the April of 2016. So every single all the Flintlock books and the spin-off specials, they've all been done through Kickstarter. And to be honest, pretty much everything I've released since 2015 has been pre-ordered through Kickstarter. There are a couple of exceptions, but mostly everything has been done through that platform. I find it just works for me completely. So it's a great platform to use.
Excellent.
I mean,
and we had a comment there from...
There's such a fan base, isn't there? Such a hunger for indie books at the moment. You know, I mean, we're obviously going to talk about it all, but it just seems so popular, especially on Kickstarter. You know, there's several running.
I think the thing is with Kickstarter, I think one of the things that I think the comics are the second most popular type of product available on Kickstarter.
Wow.
It's games which actually lead the way, tabletop games and video games, but then comics come a close second. And it just seems to be a kind of a really kind of a community there that really responds nicely to indie books. And I think as well, one of the nice things about it, that with anything that you put on Kickstarter, it's a level playing field. And I think that's a really nice thing as well. So it doesn't matter if you're Keanu Reeves, or it doesn't matter if you're somebody that's just doing their first book for the very first time.
Yeah.
The minute you launch your campaign, you have as much chance of succeeding as everybody else. And I think that appeals to the kind of the indie community, and I think especially the indie comics community. I think that's one of Kickstarter's great strengths.
Yeah.
Definitely. We had a comment earlier. It's gone now, but it said, "Hi Steve, hi Shane, Andrew, and Steve. Congrats on the Flintlock Kickstarter. Really enjoyed Brawler 2." That's from Ed Doyle. Hi Ed.
Oh, I appreciate that, Ed. It's really good to get feedback on Brawler 2, because obviously that's just come out. I know some people, some of the backers have received theirs already. Other backers, they're waiting for them to come through. So whenever something goes out, it's always that little bit of kind of I guess trepidation that all the effort you put in is actually going to be worthwhile from the reader end, because that's why you're doing it. So to get any positive feedback on that, that's terrific. So thanks, Ed. I really appreciate that.
And I looked at the Kickstarter campaign and where you're at, and wow, you've totally bust the target. I mean, it's well over $4,000 now with a target of 500. And in the past, your Kickstarters have always gone way over target. And is that from you building this really faithful audience? Do you find that a lot of people are coming back for more?
I think there's a couple of things at play. I mean, one of the thing is how I approach the platform in the first place, because right from the start, I've approached it as a pre-order opportunity rather than an all or nothing plea for funding. I mean, even before Kickstarter came along, I started using Kickstarter. Time Bomb had been going for 8-9 years. So I was used to kind of putting books out and funding them myself, and generating the money to fund the books from selling the books and doing shows and that kind of stuff. So very much when I came to Kickstarter, it wasn't about getting as much money as was needed to get the book printed and published and the creators paid and all those other bits and bobs. It was really just a means to offer the book in advance and reward the backers for doing so. So my targets are always quite low, because I don't need to ask for more than that. Because, I mean, I know that whatever happens, if a Kickstarter fails or succeeds, the book is still going to be printed. It's just a way I use the Kickstarter as a way to give the backers who do choose to pre-order something more than if they were to buy a convention or afterwards through the website or indie friendly comic stores. So it's all about giving something back, and that's the thing that I really kind of embrace about personally approaching a Kickstarter campaign, and it goes right through to kind of making sure that any kind of postage costs are either included or as low as can be. So it's always kind of free postage to any UK addresses. Any of the printed rewards that go out, the backer will automatically get a digital copy as well. And I also
Cool.
kind of try and structure the campaign. So by the time the campaign is finished, every person who is backed at whatever level is getting something extra, which won't be offered anywhere else, or at retail or at the conventions, you know. So it's giving something back. So I think that's a really key part of what appeals to me as a backer on Kickstarter. Because I mean, at the moment, so far I've personally backed 453 projects.
Wow,
that's incredible, Steve.
So it's about supporting the platform as well as kind of using the platform to give something back, and that's a key part of how I approach the Kickstarters. And I think because of that, it's kind of I think people, hopefully people feel that they're getting value when they receive reward packages. And what I've noticed, then you do have that kind of repeat business. You have backers coming back for subsequent campaigns, and that's great to see. So there are some backers of Flintlock Book 5, and they backed my very first campaign back in 2015 for the Bomb Scares book, and they've backed everything so far. They're real loyal, and to be honest, Andrew is one of them. I mean, Andrew is regularly backing my campaigns, and it's really appreciated. It is that, I think if you're offering something which people want and you're delivering it, and they like what they get, I think it's just the same as if you were asking your local comic store to get to make sure they get the latest book by whichever creator that you're following from one of the mainstream guys.
But also it's great value as well. You're getting a new title. You're supporting British, UK, whatever indie, and it's usually less than a tenner. It's fantastic. And because we aren't going to Comic Cons at the moment, being able to get from people like yourself, Chris Askham, Sentinel, the 77, and they're coming pretty quick. You as you said, with Brawler and with we've got Harker coming up and all the other ones, you'll be dropping those titles within 2 or 3 months of Kickstarter finishing.
Reliability is a big thing, isn't
absolutely.
it? Being able, and once you've built that reputation, which you definitely have, Steve, turning around the books and delivering on your promises, I think that makes a big difference as well.
I mean, you hear tales of sort of of famous comic artists or whatever that did a Kickstarter and then don't deliver.
Yeah, I mean, I know, and to be honest, I mean, I've backed a fair few projects, as I said, but most of them, I'll be honest, probably 99% of them have delivered. There's only a very small amount that have actually failed to come through. But I mean, a couple of times I've seen that, certainly with kind of, I guess, name creators, for want of a better word, their delays on their projects have been huge. And one of the reasons I kind of see for that is that, I've been offered a contract by Marvel or DC. Well, so what? At the end of the day, you've entered into a contract with your backers of your project.
Your first
so you need to get that work done because they've already paid for it. It wouldn't work. I don't think you get that in any other industry. Imagine if you got a plumber around or something and you paid him up front and they say, "Oh, sorry, mate, I can't come to you now because I've got a more important job." You'd soon tell him where to go.
Queen wants me.
So I think it's all about coming back to respecting the backers, which is another key thing. I think a backer of any Kickstarter, they're good enough to put their money down in advance, effectively, almost sight unseen for what they just have. They just either like what you're doing or they have faith in how you promoted that product and what you're showing them about it. So I think it's really important to kind of follow through and just treat backers with respect. And yes, of course, delays happen. Things happen, especially over the last kind of 12 months. Look, what we've all been going through.
Absolutely.
Things happen which get in the way. But I think then it's a case of just letting people know. Be transparent, if
keep up the updates.
That's right. If there's something that's come up that's got in the way and that prevented things happening as they should, let people know, because I think the more transparent you are, then people will be quite kind of I think I find that people are quite open then and quite happy as long as they're kept informed. It's when you have months and months and months of no updates, no information, and no comment coming through your letterbox. That's when I think people get upset, and rightly so.
We've got another comment here from Hal Larry.
Hiya, Hal.
Hey, Hal, how's it going, mate? Keep being awesome, Steve.
I don't think you've got any choice in that, have you, mate?
Can't help it. Just happens, doesn't it, Steve?
It's a natural.
Apparently, we can watch the Kickstarter video on here.
Give it a go.
So Sam informed me. We'll let people have a look at the video.
That's fine. Just say in advance though, that your introduction with all your little kind of was much more impressive than the video is going to be.
No.
The video is something I put together myself, and that's all I need to say in it. Really, it's more industrial light and tragic than industrial.
But of course, guess who did the intro video? As usual.
He did.
As usual. Do most things.
Man of many talents. Oh,
right.
Hal said he's recovered from COVID.
Yeah. I saw that on. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Hal. Good stuff, mate. Well done. Glad you're still with us. Let's see if we can get that video rolling, Sam. Is Sam with us?
He's there.
Or is he gone to put his kids to bed?
That's not a euphemism.
No, he's peddling like crazy. I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah. He's cranking up.
There's plenty Well, while he's getting it ready, I'm sure it'll come on in a minute. Had another comment from Hal, actually. 4 weeks back on covers. So, yes, great cover artist. I don't know if anyone out there is familiar with Hal Aaron. Check out his stuff. It's good stuff. Has he done any work for you, Steve? Hal?
Well, actually, way back, he actually, Hal, the very first kind of version of the website we had, he designed that for me. So, and he did
again, a man of many talents.
So, yeah.
This industry. So,
here we go.
Whoa. Full screen, please, Sam. I was waiting for a little video of Steve selling the book.
Well, here we go.
I told you it was basic.
Yeah,
You're not wrong.
But it does the job.
It does the job.
Yeah. It fills that gap in Kickstarter, doesn't it? It's an additional.
It works with videos, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They say, don't they? The percentage, I don't know what the percentage is, but you've got much more chance of having a successful campaign if you have a video than if you don't have a video. So it makes perfect sense. The Clockwork Cavalier, Steve, that is such a cool character. What was the inspiration behind that character?
Well, I mean, it ties in with the inspirations for all the most of the kind of Flintlock characters. I mean, the idea was that the kind of the tone and the style of the stories were kind of very much going back to the adventure strips that we used to have in the weekly comics of the 60s and 70s, which most of the time were in black and white, which is also why Flintlock is in black and white.
Yeah,
and of course,
the
Clockwork Cavalier is all in that kind of the vein of the Steel Commando, Archie, those kind of even Brassneck. We have those kind of characters who are these kind of robotic kind of metal people who are in these suddenly, incongruous environments. And it was the same thing with the Flintlock Cavalier, and it just sounded great. The Flintlock Cavalier, it's a great sounding name. And what was it? I mean, and it was very much, originally going to be something which was almost a kind of throwaway, but he's one of the characters that people seem to have really kind of gotten behind. And although he would always plan to have a bigger role in the overall kind of main story arc that runs through Flintlock, I wasn't expecting that he would have more than maybe that initial kind of 6-page complete story in book 1. He's had a couple of other solo adventures, and also then he had his own color special, and that's all come from the reaction of readers to the character. So it's great that people are kind of enjoy that character, because and he's as well, he's the only real kind of male lead in the Flintlock series.
Yeah,
because it's all they're all female leads, so he is quite unusual in that respect.
Was the idea of having so many female lead characters intentional, or was that just the way it played out? You were just inspired by those characters.
Oh no, that was absolutely intentional. Again, it harkens back to the kind of the weekly comics and the girls' comics and that kind of stuff. We always had these kind of adventure stories, and kind of very kind of positive kind of female comic characters. And the idea for Flintlock came back into me in 2015, which seems so long ago now. But I was at a convention in London, and I was just suddenly noticing that all the kind of the images I was seeing of female characters, all these kind of ridiculously fantasy images, these massively oversized breasts and stuff, not wearing anything. These real kind of 14-year-old kind of takes on what women were like. So I thought it'd be nice to do something which actually featured women in lead roles, but not in that kind of like overly sexual kind of victim kind of way. The women in Flintlock behave how women actually do behave. So so they're wearing the clothes they would have worn at the time. They're not, they're not kind of just wearing stuff which is then, open down to the waist for no reason, stilettos for no reason, and all that kind of stuff, and pouting. None of that kind of stuff. So that it's all kind of plays into them being these positive and realistic female characters, which I think is something we still don't really see enough of in comics, really. So it's a pushback against that as well.
No, it's nice to see it, mate. It really is. And what I also like about it is the amount of artists that you've got involved. I mean, the quality of artists. I mean, we're just looking at these images now. I think that's Dean Beattie, is it? I've seen stuff like from Chris Askham. Just absolutely superb stuff. How do you get all these guys involved?
Well, you ask them. So I mean, it sounds really. Ask them, and of course, with Flintlock, it's I mean, all the artists on the strips and that, they all get a page rate as well. So that's an important part of it, and with the covers and some of the cover artists I've got, it's been a dream. Ian Kennedy on book 2 was just wonderful, and of course, then now I've got John Burns on the latest cover.
Beautiful cover.
It's great, and I think and I think one of the things as well because I think certainly in the UK, there's very much comics is a great sense of community in comics, and because I think I've been been at the shows now for so many years, a lot of the artists that do kind of the illustrations on Flintlock, whether they're in the actual main strips or whether the guest artists who do the special kind of print illustrations. I know them, I've built up a relationship and a friendship with them, and it's always much easier then to ask someone, hey, would you be interested? And most of the time people have been really happy to kind of help to contribute to the Flintlock world, which has been terrific.
And you write a lot of the stories yourself, don't you?
Oh yeah, Flintlock is Flintlock. I write completely myself, so it really is. I mean, so every story, every spin-off of Flintlock, that's all me. So again, when you know, going back to certainly the first book, and even every other book since of the Flintlock, there's a great sense of kind of a bit of nervousness, because obviously, you know, if someone like Brawler, you're kind of I've done like a story in there, but I'm surrounded by a lot of other really talented people as well. So it's kind of, you know, you feel a bit more, almost a bit more comfortable, you know, because you hope that if someone thinks that my story isn't great, there's 7 others that hopefully they'll like. But obviously with someone like Flintlock, it's just me, you know.
It's all on you.
So yeah, so that's I mean that's one of the kind of I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of a thrill, but it's a scary thrill as well, because you know, you're hoping that the people will like what they read, and every book is the same. And I think there's also then becomes the weight of expectation, because I know there are people who've been following Flintlock from the start, and they're really engaged with it. And with every book that comes out, it's hoping that yes, they'll actually enjoy the latest stories. And of course then enjoy it to the point where they'll continue coming back for more.
And in the Cypher book itself, is it a shared universe?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is with Flintlock that I mean, all the stories are set within that 100 years of history, but all the different stories themselves take place in different decades. So the Lady Flintlock story is set in the 1750s. The Flintlock Cavalier is in the 1760s. The Sparrowhawk stuff in Australia, that's in the 1790s. The pirate stuff with Shanti, the Pirate Queen, that was in the 1720s, and so on. So they're all operating in different kind of decades throughout that period of history. But what, you know, but part of it is that what can happen with one character, say in the 1720s or the 1730s, can have an impact on another character in the 1770s and 1780s and so on, even though those characters may never actually meet. So there's some element of crossover in there, but also there's things which are not, you know, some things do happen kind of separately. And like, for example, the Dick Turpin stuff, that's set in the Flintlock timeline, but that's in the 1730s. And so only the Dick Turpin stuff will be in the 1730s. None of the other characters will cross into that period. So it's kind of building this kind of this 100-year timeline where all these characters can, you know, operate, and some of them interact, some of them don't, but it all takes place in that tapestry of real world history.
So there's not going to be like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen where they all mash, is there? Because they're, you know, some have not born, some are not, you know, may not be alive.
Yeah. So someone asked me recently if Lady Flintlock would ever kind of do like a team up with Shanti the Pirate Queen, and no, because by the time Lady Flintlock arrives, Shanti's no longer with us; she's dead. So you know, that's not a spoiler. That's just, you know, how it is.
That's just reality.
Yeah. So I think that there's that thing. So they won't, you know, they won't all kind of come together. The only character that could possibly interact with every other character is the Flintlock Cavalier, because he doesn't age.
Of course.
Yeah. But all the others do.
Yeah. And do you think, I'm not read all the books, but will there be sort of real historical characters interacting with your characters throughout the series?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why the book takes, I mean, each book roughly takes a year to produce, and within that, I mean, this latest book is a few months late, because obviously things were delayed because of COVID, you know, everything last year. But on average, every year there's been a new book out. But part of the reason it takes a while, obviously, you know, the artists need a while to draw the actual strips, but it's the research that needs to be done for each of those periods, because it is about getting each of those periods of history correct, and it's trying to get it as accurate as I can get it without it being reading as dry and interesting. So I think if you can be too kind of tied by history, that it actually become, you know, you're hamstrung by it, but it's still kind of looking into each of those periods to make sure that it's on point. So an example is the Sparrowhawk stuff, which is set in 1790s Australia. So a lot of the research in that was involved, with the First Fleet and the founding of the colony at Port Jackson and a few years after that. So that's a huge part of how the stories come together. But then what I also make sure I do in each of the Flintlock books themselves is that at the back, the part of the back matter is always like a 2-page historical kind of feature, which is basically almost like a little essay, which basically gives a bit of the actual real world background to some of the ideas and some of the places and some of the real world people that you meet in the Flintlock stories. So that's been a nice thing to do as well, and there's been nice feedback about that. People like the fact that once they've read the actual fictional stories, then there's a little bit in the back which kind of tells them, right, this is actually what really happened. This is what really inspired this. So I mean, at the moment, I said I'm just finishing off Flintlock book 5. All the strips are all lettered and done, but today I finished off the back matter for Flintlock book 5, which is all about the founding of Australia and the arrival of the First Fleet. So that's all there at the back as well. So it's all part of kind of building a kind of a bigger picture. Because the thing is, I'm a bit of an obsessive about the 18th century. I love the period, which is why I'm set a book in that period. But also, I'm aware that not everybody is as obsessed about it as I am. So obviously, it's making sure that that although I'll put references in and put characters, real world characters that I know of, I'm aware that other people will probably have no clue who these people are. So he's trying to provide a bit of context as well, so they can hopefully then they'll find the stories then that more enjoyable.
But because
it's a nice little.
I was going to say, because British comics is, there's such a deep history of adventure comics, girls comics. People are prepared, so all the guys that are out there now, are open-minded for a good comic, that does what it says without the we're moving again.
We're moving. We're looking
Something's
at some
happening.
artwork.
Something's
Can you
happening.
get some artwork, Sam?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, he was determined.
Yeah.
He was determined to do this.
Yeah, I've got that one as well. That's a long time ago.
Do you still remember that, Steve?
Yeah, this was, I think it was 1992. This one came out.
Whoa! What, really?
Yeah,
30 years ago.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
Steve, mate, blimey.
So yeah. So this is my this was pretty much my second published work, and this was
for Atomica, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. They're UK kind of arm.
Yeah.
And
careful, Sam.
With an artist called Pete Venters, who shortly after working with me, Quick Comics, I'm sure is not connected, and he spent most of his career since then painting cards for Magic the Gathering. That card game.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So most of his career since then has been doing illustrations for that.
Although the cover there is obviously John Bolton.
Yeah, that's John Bolton, the cover.
I don't think you've had a knock-on effect with him. So
no. The thing is about that. The thing is, I mean, it's he's really captured the actual character inside, but the actual original painting that John did was actually nude. And so he's actually put he put the top and the jeans on afterwards, which was fine, okay, right, because it was a lovely cut. But the original, the thing is that the photo reference was that was Pete used at the time was one of our friends at the time, who was, I think she just turned 16. Oh. So when it originally came out, yeah. I think he had a bit of grief from the girl's family, because obviously there was this image of it looked like very much like I mean, John didn't know it was a real person. He just based it on the on the character that Pete drew inside. But yeah, that was a bit of that was a bit fraught. as the I mean, the book itself, it was a vampire story. That's the idea.
Gotcha.
And
it all makes sense.
And it was yeah. I mean, it's such a long time ago. The main thing I remember from it now is that I possibly had the worst review I've ever had for anything I've ever done for this book. Which it was dreadful.
Well, it was early in your career, mate. You know, you're still learning your craft.
It was early, and yeah, but it was actually lambasted. It was a shame, but then I've had other people, you know, who've come across the book since then and read it at the time, and they really enjoyed it. So I guess it's one of those things. But you know, you always get good reviews, you always get bad reviews, but you tend to remember the bad ones more. But the nice thing is, nothing I've ever done since has been as terrible as the review that I had for this first book when it came out.
Only ways up, as they say. So Sam enjoyed it as well, obviously, because he bought it. So there you go. Sam's got wonderful taste, haven't you? So going, because I mean, that takes us quite neatly back. To your sort of early career, because you say that was one of your first comics that you wrote professionally. How did you? What sort of made you want to get into comics? Is it something that you always, you know, were into as a child? Did you read comics as a child?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I always remember having a comic to hand, you know, and it was very much when, you know, when I was going little. And I'd always be bought a weekly comic, and there'd be a weekly comic I could have, and it could only be the one. So I would kind of change, because then what would happen? I'd be reading one, and then I'd see an advert for a new one, and then I'd change over to that one, and so on and so forth. So there was very few comics that I read kind of like for years and years and years. So because I remember reading, I think Battle. And then suddenly I saw an advert for Action, so I switched to Action, and then I saw an advert for 2000 AD. So it's just you know, it was that kind of thing. So I'd always had a comic, and it was only really what really kind of really turned it into, I guess, well, I'll be honest, an obsession, because that's what it is.
Hey, we're all the same.
I know, it's true. But it was in 1979, and it was when Des Skin revamped the British Marvel weeklies, and under the thing called the Marvel Revolution, the Marvel UK Revolution, and he released, you know, I think the Spider-Man comic and the Marvel comic, and I think Hulk comic. They all came out pretty much almost the same week they came out, and I bought them, and I just thought they were terrific. And I think part of it is because they seem to take so long to read each one, and the reason is because obviously, I mean, when you look back at him now, it's horrendous, because what he did, he chopped them all up, so he put effectively 22-page worth of stories into like 4 pages, and so it was, you know, but took forever to read. It was great, and I just got caught up with that whole kind of thing, so I then started just buying the Marvel weeklies just religiously, and really, and I guess I was that age. I would have been, you know, 10, 11 years old. So I was that age where, you know, all the kind of the hucksterism, you know, face front true believers, all that kind of thing, and you know, the permanent Marvel like Maximus, all those little things that was you get really excited about. I was that age where it really appealed. But from that, I just really started just following the stories, and then they brought out these little digest books called pocket books, and they did. And I know that the Fantastic Four one reprinted all the Jack Kirby stuff in black and white, so that you know, and I think the Spider-Man pocket book did all the Steve Ditko stuff. So then I had that exposure to the real kind of classic stuff. And by that time, then I was just starting to get into fanzines. So then I discovered fanzines. And of course, once you, and then you're kind of on a slippery slope then, really.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
and that's it. And of course, at the same time, then discovering that, you know, people, you know, would write stories and there'd be scripts, and this was all at the time as well, when, you know, very formative years when people like Alan Moore were first coming onto the scene. This is before he'd done Swamp Thing and all that kind of stuff. When he was first doing his short stories in 2000 AD, and then Halo Jones and Skiz, all before he really kind of smashed America. And that kind of understanding that, okay, yeah, this is great, and I'll give it a go. So I started doing these little kind of stories which I'd send to strip zines, and that kind of stuff. And I guess all that kind of early stuff it's all dreadful stuff, but it's all part of learning what you're doing and learning your craft. And I think there was one of the Fleetway annuals. I think it might be the Judge Dredd annual, one of the hardcover ones they first did. I think it had example of what a comic strip looked like, with the layout and that kind of stuff. And I remember looking at that and being really interested in how to lay out a comic strip, and then starting to adopt that, and kind of working with that, and just taking it from there. So that's so by the time I was kind of 15, 16, I was regularly kind of trying to write comics. They weren't particularly good comics, but you all have to start somewhere. But I think then I think it was in 1989, maybe 1990. I forget. It's so long ago. That's when I had my first professional sale, and that was to Crisis. And I had a short story in there. And to be honest, that was the point where I thought, okay, I could do this, because I think the moment moment a publisher or someone says pays you for the work you've done, you kind of think you start looking in a different way. And think, okay, yeah, I'm obviously I have a certain kind of competence. I can do this. This is what I'll kind of feature and do. So then for a while, I started kind of submitting stuff and kind of just getting pictures and things like that together. I did some work for a while, and it never really got anywhere. But I mean, with Alan Cowsill, when it was the very first iteration of Warhammer comic. It wasn't the one that subsequently came out. They're working on one before then. So I did a few things with him. Never actually got to the point where they were printing, because the comic never appeared as it was originally conceived. Right. But all those kind of things were really kind of formative. And then just as I was about to kind of really get stuck into it, I sold the script to Atomica. And it was this the early 90s, and then I went abroad. I decided I had a choice between staying in the UK and trying to work away in comics, or I had a choice of working overseas with my day job at the time. And an instinct told me to do the working abroad. And as it happened, about 6 months after I moved abroad, that's when the 90s implosion happened, and everything suddenly just collapsed inwards. But then I ended up spending 13 years abroad, and I was still following comics at the time. I was still getting comics. I would still kind of catch what was going on. My interest in comics as a reader never dwindled, but I'd stopped kind of creating them myself because I was doing other things. And it was only then when I came back to the UK, and a couple of years after I came to the UK, that it really kind of started again. And then that was the convention that you ran, Shane, with the Custard Factory, the very first.
2006.
Yeah. So that was really the point where it all kind of really kind of kicked off for me, really, and I started probably taking it seriously, because I went to that show, and it was the first convention I'd been to since the early 90s. I regularly used to go to the annual London convention, where so many of us used to make this kind of like this annual mecca, wasn't it, to London. So I went to the Custard Factory show, expecting it to be very similar to what I'd remembered from the early 90s, and in some ways it was. But what was different was that there was all these indie guys selling their comics, but they just looked like proper comics. Whereas, I mean, what I remember from the UK conventions, there were a couple of exceptions from in the ones in London, but for most people who'd rock up selling their own comic, it was obvious that they were kind of like home produced or self produced. They were kind of like they were they were kind of photocopied or certainly you could tell from the production values they weren't the same as the comics you would get in the shelves you get at the comic shop. But suddenly at the Custard Factory show, there was all this stuff which it just looked just as good, and in many ways stood head and shoulders above the stuff I'd seen, at the comic shop. So I came away from that show with just literally a pile of stuff, and it was just from all the indie people, and that's where I first met people like Dave and Colin from Maxim UK and Andy Winter and all loads of people like that. That's where I first encountered them. But the thing is, as well as walking away from that show with the big stack of comics, I also walked away with an understanding in myself that I wanted to come back to the show the following year, but be behind the table with my own comic in front of me, and that's what I did.
And
so
I remember you were.
So it was in 2007, October 2007, when we did that second show, and it was in the bigger Millennium Point venue. That's where I first rocked up in with Time Bomb and the Larry jackets, and it went from there.
And the rest is history, as they say. But of course, back then you weren't employing the whole Kickstarter thing. You were just producing the print runs and selling them, sort of cold, if you like, actions. Yeah. Was it quite challenging in those early days to get? Well, yeah. Did you hit the ground running?
Well, not really. I think the thing is, as well, you kind of like, it was that kind of thing is that you don't really know what to expect when you first do it. So, but it was that kind of thing. I always think that noble failure is better than not trying at all. It was very much a case I'll give it a go, and because if I didn't do it, I'd always be thinking what if. So you need to know. Sometimes you need to bite the bullet and just do it. So those early days, they were the first few years. I mean, were quite hard going, because I'd fund all the print runs myself, and obviously and in those early days there was very few conventions. I think there was only 1 or 2 conventions a year, so you'd only have those opportunities to sell stuff through. So well,
it was more than this year's going to be, I think, unfortunately.
yeah, I know, but I mean, you didn't have all the.
Year we had 2. We fitted 2 in, didn't we? I think there's one in Taunton, and there was the True Believers.
True Believers. That was the first and last one I did last year. But then it was back then it was just turning up and just giving it a go. Yeah. But the thing is, what was really good right from the start, and this is the thing where anyone I speak to now who's thinking about doing it, giving it a go, I always kind of say give it a go. Was even though the book I had on the table, although it was nicely produced, it wasn't great. I would be honest with you, it wasn't a great comic. But the sense of community that from it off, that was the thing. So people were so kind of welcoming and so embracing, and that was the thing, and that's the thing that's been a constant. There is that huge sense that you're all in it together, and people are genuinely interested in what you're doing, and supportive. I mean, the amount of great advice I got in those early years, I mean, it's incredible. And it becomes a bit circular because over the past few years, I've been in the position where I've been at a table at a convention, and the person next to me is their first one. And I remember what it's like. I've been there, and it's been great sometimes, having a conversation with them and having that same, imparting the same kind of knowledge to them that was shared with me back then. So that's the great thing about doing all this. I know, it's, of course, the sales are good, and if you have a popular book, that's great as well, and all those other things. But it's the friendships. That's the thing that's really quite humbling in a way. The amount of people I've met since starting Time Bomb and creating comics, and people who've become more than just acquaintances and good friends. It's just been great. I mean, I've never encountered that in any other kind of anything I've ever done. That kind of sense of kind of all kind of coming together and just providing that element of just support and stuff. It's lovely. I think that's one of the great things about creating comics here in the UK, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, me too, mate. I mean, I remember those conventions, especially, as you say, the early ones, like the early Fix and the early Thought Bubbles as well. You could walk down, the aisles, and you could feel that excitement amongst all the self-publishers. They'd be together. They'd be, especially at the beginning of the convention, before they know what's going to happen. That sort of sense of excitement that what the day is going to hold, and they're all talking to each other about their books, exchanging books, and just being inspired by each other. It was a pleasure to walk down those aisles. It really was.
Yeah.
There's so much time and effort has gone into, like you said, it takes a year sometimes to do a book. It's not as if we can just sit down and you rattle them out. We're not what you'd call professional because we have other commitments. So, it may take these guys 3 months, 6 months, and you're there suddenly in front of hundreds of people and like-minded guys. And it's so
the culmination.
Yeah. But Steve, I was going to ask, did you, Shane and I went to this, the webcomics thing down in London. Did you ever get to one of those? What was it called, Shane?
The Web of Mini Comics thing.
That was it. Right, because that was very interesting. It's a huge hall full of indie small press creators.
It was inspiring. That inspired me to do
Fast, wasn't it?
That show. Yeah. It was an inspiring show because I think there were around, about 80 or 90 small press publishers in one room. And say small press, but some of them were like semi-pro, but they were doing web comics. But it was a really inspiring place to be. It's where I met you first time.
It was, mate. Yeah.
And we're talking about 2004. So Steve was still overseas, sunning himself.
He was, But what I was going to say is exactly that. Is that stood next, because we were all exhibiting, and stood next to me was a 16-year-old lad, and that was Ali Graham, who ended up doing Housed years ago, and I think he's a very successful graphic designer and artist now. But he's like, he had his hood on and he's whatever, and I was like, stand up, look at people, engage. So it's just passing on that mantle of knowledge, and
you've done
a wonderful thing.
And you've done it formally, Steve. I mean, I remember when you came to Comics Uncovered and you did some portfolio reviews for us. And, I mean, how do you discover new talent? Because I know you do that. Do you do it all through the portfolio review process, or do you do it online? Because I know a lot of
I mean, it's a combination, really. I mean, obviously, you get to know a lot of people, so that's always useful. So if there's if there's something I need, and I know there's an artist whose style would fit, and I know them already, I might reach out to them. A perfect example is that's how I brought Andrew on for Brawler 2.
Yeah,
because I knew and his style would fit to the story that we wanted. But I mean, Time Bomb gets a ridiculous amount of submissions.
Right, that's good.
And we've had loads of submissions for years. But certainly over the last couple of years, it's really kind of huge amount. We probably get about probably about 100 a month. It's a ridiculous amount of submissions.
Whoa, that's a lot.
And so obviously any of those that come through, if any of those seem kind of potentially kind of creators that I like the look of or think would fit, I'll save them and keep a record and reach out. But I mean, the portfolio reviews you mentioned at that event, I love doing those. They were great. And I think again it goes part to kind of, there's nothing better than sitting down with an artist and actually properly going through their pages and giving them feedback. I mean, it's great, and I think to do it properly, you've got to give yourself a good half hour, I think 45 minutes to do it properly. I think I was overrunning at your event, I think, because of that. Because I don't think you can, with any kind of any portfolio review, 10 minutes that you're not going to justify it in 10 minutes.
No, it's really difficult.
I mean, and I think it's more beneficial to the artist if they actually get a proper feedback session. So I mean, so the submissions come in from those elements as well. So I think some of those artists I know I kept in touch with, and hopefully at some point in the future I'll be able to do something with some of those guys as well. But the thing is as well, there's so much talent. There's a huge abundance of talent there. On top of that, then you've also got you just need to join a few of the Facebook groups. Which are full of kind of artists who are looking for opportunities and stuff, or just sharing their work. It's a staggering amount of kind of talent that's out there. So it's much easier to find, I think, someone now than it used to be, even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, before the internet. I think that's the thing. That there's too much talent to actually for them all to get work. Or to do something.
It must be really difficult.
That's the conundrum with it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and if anyone's sort of watching or listening, and they want to submit work to you, what would you say are the main top things that you look for in an artist?
Well, the thing is, I mean, Time Bomb has always had an open submissions policy, and the advice I'd give to anybody, and it's not just who wants to submit work to me, submit to anybody. Is look at the submission guidelines and read them and follow them. I mean, on our website, the submission guidelines are there. It has its own little separate page. It's all very, very clear, very transparent. How we want to be approached and what we're looking for. So just follow them, and that doesn't apply to just me. That applies to whoever you want to kind of submit work to. Don't just send out a blanket kind of email with a link and hope for the best. Understand who you're submitting to. Take some time to kind of get a feel of the type of comics that they produce, because if you're submitting to a company that say only publishes superhero comics, they're probably not going to be interested in your autobiographical slice of life comic, no matter how great it is, and vice versa. So it really is kind of doing a little bit of groundwork and doing a little bit of research and following those submission guidelines. At the same time, when the shows are back up and running, hopefully, I'm hoping by the end of this year, to be perfectly honest. I'm hoping Thought will happen. I've certainly booked my accommodation for it, so I hope I don't have to cancel.
Well, let's hope the hotels are open first.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's so many things.
Weird.
But so many things that are depending on it.
That's it. But when anyone sees me at a show, they're always more than welcome to come across and have a chat with me and show me their work. And I might ask you to come back a bit later if it's at a peak time. But I will spend time with you, and I'll be completely honest with my feedback. I really will. Especially if it's yeah, I think so. And I think sometimes that kind of, I don't know. I think a couple of times that I think in the past couple of years, I know I've given kind of feedback, and because it wasn't, wow, this is brilliant. It wasn't well received. But I'd rather be honest in what my thoughts are than give some kind of false hope.
Yeah, you don't exactly. I think that's the way to be, mate. Barry Renshaw. I always called him Harry.
Harry the Barry.
I think we all know Harry. Hi Barry. Good evening, mate. Evening, gents. A question for you all. Something which I've been working on for the past few months. What shape do you see the industry in the UK and US post-COVID? A return to the old ways or something new emerging? That's a very open question. What's your take on that one, Steve?
I mean, to be honest, I think what's been really interesting over the past 12 months is that when back in March last year, we were all going into lockdown and everything's being closed. It was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Oh, this is going to be dreadful. This is going to be an awful kind of, everything's going to stop. It's going to be awful. And I know it stopped for kind of a lot of kind of industries, but what I kind of got a sense of that certainly with the comics, they still continued. People still continued creating comics.
Yeah.
And I think people were suddenly jumping onto more alternative means to get their comics. So even when the actual comic shops were closed, people were still kind of exploring ways where they could get stuff. And what was interesting for me over the past 12 months is that how online sales shot up. They shot up. Obviously, I guess a lot of it is because there were no shows. So obviously, if people wanted to get copies of my books, they'd either have to kind of support one of the Kickstarters I'd done, or they'd have to use the online store. So there's been a big uplift there in trade. I think as well, because people were still creating comics, it means that stuff was still being released. I think people were surprised that how not that comics weren't affected by it at all, but I think certainly at the indie kind of level, in many ways, it almost felt like business as usual. I think a lot of people would have turned to online resources that they wouldn't have otherwise considered because they were forced to. And I think some of those people will actually stay using those online resources because they found it was worthwhile. I mean, the thing is, comics and the comics community is always evolving. So it's not just they're evolving, just that they'll evolve just because of COVID. They've always been changing. That's the thing, you know. Even before there was COVID and lockdown, comics were still transforming. They were still
maybe COVID just give it that. Maybe COVID just give it that push, you know, because it, like you say, it was already happening. You know, people were already adapting to the new technologies and the new opportunities, and COVID just meant that things happened a little bit quicker than they might have done otherwise.
But a lot of us were furloughed. So, I mean, I was furloughed in March for 3 or 4 months, and I still needed a structure to my day. And because my wife was working from home, so I was getting up and I was doing 7 or 8 hours drawing, doing comics, and rattled through, and then, you know, got into Brawler 2 with you and the 77, Future Quake.
Just about every indie comic out there, mate.
Yeah, Sentinel, absolutely. You know, it's there's some interesting stuff going on. I mean, especially with Blazer as well.
Yeah,
you know, Blazer's a great project, and I've ended up sub-editing and art directing that as well.
Yeah,
as well as
I think that's the thing, because I mean, over the last 12 months, some really great kind of UK titles appeared. Now, they probably would still have appeared anyway, but I think suddenly, whether there was this sudden upswell of interest because, you know, people were spending more time online, so people would get to hear about them more, and then people would then support those online channels. I mean, maybe that's an element to it, but I think, you know, some comics came from COVID and they've been really great. I mean, Rachel's COVID,
Rachel,
you know, is a brilliant example of that, where, you know, that's something that artists and creators have always done. They've been able to kind of take whatever shit is thrown and turn it into something magical. And that's, you know, that's always the way with art, isn't it? You know, it's to take all the terrible things that are going on around you or in your community or in the world, and actually turn it into something which is really quite special.
Creativity from adversity.
Yeah, creativity endures. You know, I think creativity will always endure. And I think hopefully once we're out of it and the show, I mean, I'd be fascinated to see what the shows are like once they're back. You know,
me too, mate. I'm still working it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be really interesting to see, because I think the big guys will still come back, but a lot of those smaller little conventions, will they come back, or will they evolve into something else?
Or will they be more the norm, where you're getting 100, 200 people in a church hall, like there was one in Melksham, wasn't there, for a couple of years?
Yeah,
near me, and that it was basically a nice small convention. Whereas someone like Super Comic Con, where you're getting thousands of people, is that going to be frowned upon?
For a little while, maybe.
For a little while, yeah.
I think it'll be for a little while. I think it'll be difficult to do the really big shows, and I think we'll see a lot of the smaller shows come back sooner. But I think eventually, as everybody becomes vaccinated.
I mean, the middle-sized show like ICE is, where you got I think that might be more of the norm. Where you've still got a draw. But anyway, we've had our hour. So what I'd like to say, Steve, can you give us one last quick pitch on the Kickstarter? How many days we've got left running?
I've got at the moment, I think I've got 17 days left, so I'm about halfway through. So I'm in that quiet middle bit, which is such a grueling period to get through. So far it's doing really well. It's reached its funding goal. Anyone that's interested in picking up Flintlock Book 5, jump on the Kickstarter. Obviously, all the other books in the series are all available as part of that. And at the moment, I think 5 stretch goals have been unlocked, and everybody who backs the Kickstarter at whatever level will be getting something extra in their packages. So yeah,
that's really nice. And where can people find you online, Steve, if they want to order back issues?
I mean, Time Bomb Comics is the website. But we also have the ranges of some of the ranges available through the GetMyComics.com website as well. And I know I'm on Aaron Rackley's Buy Small Press site as well. And of course I'm on social media myself, so anyone is welcome to kind of reach out to me directly at any time. Whether it's for kind of advice about running their own Kickstarter, feedback about their comics, or just a chit chat about comics. I'm always more than happy to kind of hear from people. Great stuff.
Well, thank you so much for coming
on the brilliant
show, Steve. Yeah, really good chatting with you, mate. Thank you so much. I hope that it's a huge success, the book. It looks like it is.
Yeah.
Because you've done it. I'm looking forward to seeing more books coming out from Time Bomb.
Yeah, and, onwards and upwards, mate.
Onwards and upwards, yeah.
Onwards and upwards.
Have yourself a great evening, Steve.
You too. All the best.
All the best.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Bye.